Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana. Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana. Yasodanandana Vrajajanaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gopimanam Ki. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. This is part 4 in our seminar series. Time permitting, what I think I'm going to do is, at the beginning of each session, do a little review of what we just covered, and then go into the new material and just follow that pattern. So, from yesterday evening, the subject that we covered was Kapila Dev began making some introductory and summary responses to Devahuti's appeal. She's addressed him as like an axe to cut the tree of material existence at the root. She's addressed him as her eye, by which she can see reality from illusion. She's compared him to the sun that spreads illumination in the darkness of the universe so that things as they are can be seen. She recognizes that she is dependent. That's a nice realization. We're dependent upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead's mercy. You who have, by your potency, covered me in this dense darkness of illusion, you can remove it. Kindly do so. So, appreciating her question very much, her appeal. Yesterday evening we heard the beginning of Kapila Dev's reply. What happened? So this shows the first verse from yesterday evening. We covered 4 or 5 verses. In a summary manner, he'll go into details very shortly, but in a summary manner, he is informing Devahuti, and he's informing us, and he's going to be describing a very ancient yoga system whereby the individual soul connects with the Supreme Soul. And he's describing here it's the ultimate benefit. We're going to hear something more about this term again this morning's class, but Nikshayasaya. We spoke about Shreya and Shreya Uttama and Nikshayasaya, the ultimate benefit of the living entity. Just as a review point, because it's going to be mentioned again. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur takes this kind of hierarchy approach in his commentary and says there's material benefit or material attachment, and then there's spiritual benefit, spiritual attachment, and then there's the ultimate spiritual attainment and spiritual attachment and spiritual benefit. And that's bhakti, connecting with the Supreme Person in love. But to get there, we're going to hear this morning, there has to be knowledge. Sankhya, what's what? Matter and spirit. And as we heard, transfer consciousness from matter to spirit. Attachment from matter to attachment to spirit. That's the program. So it starts with knowledge, and then it starts with acting upon that knowledge, or finding the root of existence and watering the root of existence. The fruit of that, he's declaring, and he's going to detail it further, is duality fades. And the duality in the form of happiness and distress. We like happiness. We don't like distress. But we should also not wish for material happiness because you buy into the duality program, and distress is just right around the corner, or not in your face, in a moment, or the next moment. It's the duality program, and one who is situated in this system of yoga, he's declaring, becomes free, detached from duality, detached from happiness and distress. And it's the highest yoga system. In the commentary, there's this advice from all Vedic wisdom presented in the purport. Tongues titikshus for Bharata from Bhagavad Gita. Matra sparshas tu kaunteya sitoshna sukha dukkada agama payonityas. Tongues titikshus for Bharata. One should tolerate that duality. Tolerate doesn't mean simply grit your teeth and bear it. It means withdraw consciousness from there and place it elsewhere. Withdraw consciousness from asat and place it in sat. Remember these terms that we discussed. Asat indriya tarshanat. One becomes, by this process of yoga, one becomes delivered from the impermanent sense activity. And with that, sat indriya. We engage our senses in a spiritual way. But you need to know what the realm of spirit is, and the realm of matter is, and the distinction between the two, and therefore Sankhya philosophy has its place. It's a beginning, or as Prabhupada describes in Nectar of Devotion, knowledge can help one get a foothold. It's a nice term to use. You're trying to attain or scale some height. It's too high. So you need to place your foot here so you can get there. So knowledge may help to get a foothold. But what's the purpose isn't the knowledge itself unto itself. It's to distinguish matter from spirit and place your consciousness upon spirit and detach yourself. So in the beginning it's just you tolerate. Withdraw consciousness from one place and put it in another place. In the next verse, or in this series of verses, in the material world, one cannot have unadulterated happiness. This is from the purport. We want happiness that doesn't end. It goes on forever and ever increasing, and there's no unhappiness we want. But in the material world, it's not available, not for sale. They may advertise it, but it's not so. It's false advertising. The Better Business Bureau should put them in jail. Not so. Any kind of happiness one has contaminated by distress. It is contaminated, by distress also. If we want to drink milk, then we have to bother to maintain a cow. Of course, we live in such a way we take milk and we don't maintain cows. But then you have to do something else to get the milk. Just move the burden, the pile of rocks from this shoulder to that shoulder to your head to your back and someplace. Anything. So spiritual life is not, I want to be lazy. It's rather place my efforts in the realm of spirit. So, in the purport of the next verse, Kapila Deva assures his mother that he will explain the ancient yoga system, which is both serviceable, it's doable, in other words. You can do it. It's not beyond your reach. It's something that you can do, and it's very helpful for those things that materially and spiritually that one needs, one requires. It's serviceable and practical. We heard yesterday evening this principle of consciousness that's misplaced, or consciousness that's attracted to the modes of nature. It's the world. We're attracted to this and repulsed by that. And someone else is repulsed by this and attracted to that. One man's food is another man's poison. But it's just the modes of nature. From an absolute perspective, the whole program itself is problematic. It's flawed. It's the source of misery. Yehi sam sparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate. Looks good. You get punched in the nose. Ooh. Let me try that again. Looks good. Punched in the nose. Ooh. Let me try it again. Very foolish. I was describing this one time, and then I was recently remembering a toy that was very popular when I was small. I was saying this and somebody else reminded me. A jack-in-the-box. You know what a jack-in-the-box is? Do they still have a jack-in-the-box toy for kids? No. They have some unmentionable foods at a place that's called Jack-in-the-Box. But the toy, when I was small, was a little box, and you press a button, and the lid pops up, and this Joker-looking, on a spring, a little guy, and it makes a sound. And all the kids laugh. And then you push it back down again because it's on a spring, and close the lid and wind it up. And then the next kid presses it. And it does the same thing. And just keep doing it over and over again. And that's what kids do, and then adults do the same thing. Hey, it looks good. Let me go for it. Happiness, senses, meet sense objects, pleasure. Oh. Let me do it a little differently this time. I'll make certain fine adjustments in the duality program, and it'll become happiness instead of distress. We just keep, like donkeys, just keep doing it, like small children, just keep doing it and getting entangled and getting punched in the face. Do it again, do it again. So that's what this slide is saying. There's different modes, different strokes for different folks. Another one of the cliches in Western culture. Recognizing that's problematic, one needs to withdraw consciousness from that and place consciousness in the Supreme. Same entity, consciousness, placed over here, problematic. Placed over there, the path of liberation. That's what Kapila Deva is saying to Devahuti. In the purport, Prabhupada is expressing that to untie that rope of illusion, one must eradicate lust and greed, two of the 6 enemies of the conditioned soul. How do you do that? You have to cleanse the mind and consciousness, and then it happens. Well, how do you do that? Lust and greed, they're gee whiz. The newspapers are filled with it, of big people overcome by lust and greed. And what to speak of the small people that are overcome by lust and greed, and all the people in between. Conditioned souls. It's just the modes of nature. Looks good. Not only we become tangled, we suffer. We don't want to suffer. We just want the entanglement. It doesn't work that way. The suffering comes. It starts with identification with the body, so proper knowledge. And with the misidentification with the body comes what comes from the body. We discussed this also, I and mine. And then there's different ideas of what's mine. The same thing, people think, no, that's mine, no, that's mine, no, that's mine, and they fight. So I should disappear and mine should disappear. The material conception, the false ego. And from that, you put in its place the spiritual conception. And when that spiritual conception is in place, material happiness isn't an attraction. You know, go for it. You know, it's spiritual. And you invest consciousness there. And the distress is also mitigated, or eventually it disappears. This is a painting of worship of Krishna, Radha Krishna. And when that's done, the whole of the village, all the different orders of life can participate like that if life is centered around worship of Radha and Krishna. It's very, very natural. You don't have to stop activity. Rather, you engage that activity centered on worship of Radha and Krishna. And this is where we ended, I believe. When that consciousness is attained, that time the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented, although very minute in size. So, in the purport, Prabhupada describes this minute in size, the fragmental part. He compares to the spark in the fire, or the particle of light and the sun, from which the particle of light comes. Qualitative oneness, and quantitative difference. So that's from the purport, that Achintya Beta Beta Tattva teaching becomes something that's part of the perspective, the world picture of one who's following this system of Sankhya as presented by Lord Kapila-Dev. So that's the little review. Now we're ready for the next few verses. Part of the good news is the classes won't be as long as yesterday, because yesterday was just presenting the whole big picture and so forth, and those introductory verses. So the classes will be more manageable. Yeah, so text 18 and 19. Maybe this morning we'll touch on 20. 20 is the first of those 8 verses. I think we'll just take a peek at it and then come back to it. So text 18. In that position of self-realization, by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service, so now it's not just conceptual, but it's application. Not just finding the root, but watering the root. One sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. It's attractive. Material existence acts less powerfully. So there are 2 different ways of looking at that, at least. One of them is, Prabhupada describes, like the immune system. One time a devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, if someone becomes two persons are exposed to the same, that's my cell phone, it's not her problem. I didn't. Just hit the off button, the red, on the right side. Thanks. Then shut it down. Okay. Yeah, the immune system. If Srila Prabhupada, if two people are exposed to the same virus or illness or flu or something that's going around, and one contracts it and the other doesn't, one gets that illness, the other doesn't, Prabhupada, is that karma? And Prabhupada's answer was, if the immune system is strong, one doesn't contract the disease. If one's immune system is weak, one's resistance is weak, you contract the disease. That was his answer. He didn't tie it to karma. So, we have choices. I mean, if you have a weak immune system, maybe that's karmic. But there are things that you can do to strengthen your immune system. And so you do that. So here we are. We're diseased. We've contracted the disease called material existence. Now what to do? We strengthen the immune system. And what's that immune system? Directing your attention to the Supreme, withdrawing your attention from matter, in the mood of enjoyment. And you practice it. And when that is there, you're protected. Here's another Prabhupada story. Sadhu Maharaj told me this one. It was at a time when the Boston temple had just begun. 26 2nd Avenue produced a number of devotees. Prabhupada sent Sadhu Maharaj to go to Boston and start a temple in Boston. So they just rented a little place somewhere to get started. And then Prabhupada was going to come and visit, so they rented a temporary little place for him to stay. They didn't have any facilities. They didn't have a car. So he flew from New York to Boston. They picked him up in the airport in a taxi. So the taxi cab driver, being one of these yakety kind of taxi cab drivers, was driving and talking over his shoulder. So, you're Swamiji, huh? You're one of those Swamis. And Prabhupada said, yes. And he said, so what does that mean? Does it mean you can sleep on a bed of nails or something like that? And Prabhupada said, better than that. And the guy said, oh, what's better than that? And Prabhupada said, I can enter into a room full of naked women and not be disturbed. And the taxi cab driver couldn't watch the road and said, oh. And Sadhu Maharaj's comment was, he wasn't sure that the taxi cab driver understood what Prabhupada meant. Not that that's what I do for a living. But that his immune system is strong. The attraction for Krishna is so great that even when the cause for agitation of the senses is there, the senses aren't agitated. It's another way of describing, a very interesting way of describing dhira, one who is not disturbed, even there's cause for disturbance. In a lecture series in Los Angeles called The Perfection of Yoga, the Yoga System, the devotees were reading from chapter 6 Bhagavad Gita, verse and purport, and Prabhupada would stop and then speak something, and then he'd continue reading, and then he'd speak something. And it was a whole series to cover the whole 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. If you get a copy of that, it's very nice listening. I've listened to it multiple times. Can we close the back door? So, at one point during that lecture, 6th chapter, Bhagavad Gita is controlling the mind through the dhyan yoga process, controlling the mind. And Prabhupada was describing the term dhira And very simply he said, dhira means when there's cause for disturbance, one isn't disturbed. And he elaborated and said, when there's no cause for disturbance and you remain undisturbed, that's not something wonderful. But when there's cause for disturbance and you remain undisturbed, that is something wonderful. So, justifying, I'm disturbed. They did this and they said that and this happened and they didn't do this and blah, blah, blah. I'm disturbed. Okay, there's cause for disturbance, but how about becoming undisturbed when there's cause for disturbance? Let's look at that. Instead of blaming my disturbance on someone else, it's your state of consciousness that's causing the disturbance. So how to address that? Well, Kapila Deva is giving that system. And he's describing that when that state exists, not only, so that's these two things, one becomes indifferent to duality that's out there, and it acts less powerfully upon him. Let's go over that. It acts less powerfully. It's something like our discussion about time, how time acts differently according to our consciousness of Krishna. The heavenly planets, Brahmaloka, our planet, the Indragopa germ, Prabhupada uses that. They're so tiny, or there's a certain insect he describes in Bengal, its life cycle is 24 hours. So their 24 hours is their 100 years is our 24 hours. And our 6 months in the heavenly planets is 1 day. And then night, it's another 6 months. So 1 year is 1 day on the heavenly planets. And as you go higher in consciousness, you get closer to eternal time, where time is eternal. There's no past, present, future. But it just expands or contracts according to consciousness. It's one thing, time, but it acts upon us differently. And same, material energy or material existence. It doesn't mean you live, the body will live forever, but it means it doesn't act upon you in the same way. It doesn't condition you in the same way. You can be in a situation that for one person is very agitating and disturbing, and for another person, you're indifferent to it. It just doesn't act upon you in the same way. Depends on your Krishna consciousness. That's what he's saying in this verse. Now, back to the immune system example, when you're exposed to some, Prabhupada uses the word contamination, you can be not affected by that contamination if your resistance is strong. And you can be affected if your resistance is weak. Similarly, he says, self-realization is the position in the liberated state one understands his constitutional position by knowledge and vairagya, renunciation. And I'm going to read this sentence twice, next one. Without knowledge, one cannot have realization. So what's the relationship between knowledge and Krishna consciousness? We're not a path of Gyan, we're a path of bhakti. So why do we need knowledge? Just chant Hare Krishna and be happy, right? Who needs knowledge? Why are we spending our whole holiday time just going over Sankhya philosophy? Just chant Hare Krishna. Haridas Thakur says in Harinam Chintamani. In order to get the full effect of chanting, there must be proper sambandha gyan. There are people out there in the world, people right in America, probably people in Seattle, that chant Hare Krishna and don't have a clue what it is. In fact, they have different ideas of what it is. The yoga scene where they have kirtan people, and won't go into it, but some of those people have abominable habits, personal lives. I won't go into it. It's shocking. What's their sambandha gyan? What's their understanding of what chanting Hare Krishna is? It's fun and way to make a living and have a nice time and hang out with people and do abominable things with those people you hang out, and that's chant. Goes on. So they're not going to get the full something, but they're not going to get the full fruit of what's intended from chanting. So Haridas Thakur says there must be, side by side with chanting, proper sambandha gyan. One can have commonly, there's misconceptions of the absolute truth, misconceptions of who is Krishna, misconceptions of the purpose of spiritual life. And one needs proper knowledge. So the way that Prabhupada says it here again, succinctly, without knowledge, one cannot have realization. In Bhagavad Gita, in his purport, Prabhupada writes, realization comes when you act in proper knowledge. Very simple. Proper knowledge, and you act, and something happens. And you go, oh, it works. Take medicine. Good physician, good diagnosis, good medicine, good diet. You act on it. Good knowledge, you act on it. Something happens. Whoa. I got some realization. This is good medicine. It's a good doctor. Let me go back to the doctor and hear something more about what I can do to improve my health. Some faith increases with that realization. And when you approach with stronger faith, you can hear more from the same source. Something like when we read Bhagavad Gita. It's not only a measure of faith, it's Krishna's unlimited. But when we read Bhagavad Gita, we all have the experience. We see or understand something that we didn't understand previously, and then again, something else and something else. In part, it's Krishna's ever fresh, and he's unlimited. But it's also some measure of our faith and our particular orientation, and at the time, what we need to hear. Krishna discloses it. So, the point that's being presented is, in the verse and then in the purport, that this knowledge, it's not theoretical, it's to be applied, and when it's applied, there's potency. And that potency neutralizes happiness and distress. One becomes indifferent to it. Consciousness is on a higher platform, and this is down here. It's just not important. It's something. Part of the reason I'm sitting in a chair is I've got a pain in my knee. You know, I'm not thinking about the pain in my knee when I'm speaking. Right now I can feel it. But because I'm thinking about it. But when I'm thinking about the subject matter, it's not in my consciousness, the pain in my knee. So if we're in the bodily conception of life and not thinking of Krishna, our pains and pleasures it's everything in our mind and stuff, and what I like and what I don't like out there. We just get absorbed and get slapped around by the material energy. Oh, it's very nice. Then, boom. Ooh. Let me try it again. Let me not try it again. Let me go somewhere else with my consciousness. Let me place my consciousness in the right place. So it's with application, that's the teaching. One becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. So Prabhupada writes, in this verse, therefore, it is stated, Jnana Vairagya Yuktena. You've heard that phrase before, haven't you? Jnana Vairagya Yuktena. The whole of the Vedic wisdom has these two, the couplet, Jnana Vairagya. So Yuktena means engage. You don't just sit in a rocking chair and speculate about Jnana and Vairagya. You live your life applying knowledge and experiencing detachment. So that means the objects are not subject to your enjoyment. It's service to Krishna. That's all. This service, that service, another service, varieties of service, service to Krishna, that's all. Different circumstances arise. This service, that service. Not a matter of I like, I don't like. It attracts me, it repulses me. It's service. Krishna's given me some service. Very, very kind. Let me do this service as best I can for Krishna. In this verse, therefore, is stated, Jnana Vairagya Yuktena, when one is in full knowledge of one's constitutional position and is in the renounced order of life, not that you have to take sannyas, you can be detached from the path of enjoyment, nivritti instead of pravritti. Detached from material attraction. Then, by pure devotional service, bhakti yuktena, both are there. The verse begins, Jnana Vairagya yuktena, bhakti yuktena, chatmana. One follows the other. Bhakti follows understanding what's what. And then you do the spiritual side and detach from the material side. Bhakti yuktena. He can engage himself as a loving servant of the Lord. And then, paripashyati. Paripashyati means that he can see things in its right perspective. What's the right perspective? Who's going to be bold enough to say, this is the right perspective? It's Krishna's perspective is the right perspective. You see things as Krishna sees. Jnana chakshusha, shastra chakshusha, paripashyati. You see things in the right perspective. Then he puts two verses from Bhagavad Gita, confirmed. Bhagavad Gita, Brahmabhuta prasanatma, na sochati na kangsati, samak sarveshu bhuteshu, mad bhaktim labate param. The Lord states that the position of mad bhaktim labate param, the real beginning of devotional service, I like that. What are we doing now? Do we have sochati and kangsati? Do we have any hankering and lamenting? Anybody out there ever have any hankering or any lamenting? So we haven't even begun devotional service? What does that mean? How are we to understand that? The real devotional service is the unmixed kind. That's what it means. We got the mixed kind. We got the hankering and lamenting and engaging in devotional service to kind of mitigate the suffering. We didn't get there yet, to the unmixed kind. So keep performing the mixed kind, striving for the unmixed kind. Where Krishna alone should be pleased. Strive for it, to your capacity. Take steps in that direction. Continue, we discussed this yesterday. Continue like that. Cultivate devotional service. Rupa Goswami's definition of bhakti. Anushilana. We practice. Abhyasa yoga yuktena. Just continue to practice according to the guidance of Rupa Goswami and the followers of Rupa Goswami and the nice examples we have available to us. The persons that set example and the teachings that they give, and Cultivate like that. Take their association, because that's immediately what's coming. This is the build-up, or the preamble, for Sadhu-Sanga. We need that. That's text 20, the first of those 8 verses. He concludes the paragraph, the purport, by saying, one who is attached to material contamination cannot be a devotee. Ooh. Devotee in that uttama, unmixed. We're mixed. We're devotees that are mixed. But that kind of devotee, the unmixed kind, hold on to material contamination, you can't enter the realm of Shuddha Bhakti. Let go of that contamination. Text number 19, the one just before the Sadhu-Sangastaka. Now it's at the top. Perfection in self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogi unless he engages in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For that is the only auspicious path. Now, in the Sankhya Yoga process that Kapila Dev is presenting to Devahuti and to us, there are components of knowledge and there are components of meditation. There's a whole chapter that's dedicated to both. 2 chapters to knowledge and 1 chapter to how the meditation is done. But when we're reading that, it would be a good idea to remember this one. Without devotional service, you can't attain perfection. You can attain something, temporary relief of something and a temporary buzz of something else. The happiness of being released from darker degrees of bondage. But nikshreyasya, the ultimate benefit, isn't going to be experienced. Or the complete detachment from asat indriya isn't going to be experienced. So bhakti is the essence. That's the message. In the purport, Prabhupada refers to one of the Sanskrit words in the verses, na yujamanaya, which means without being dovetailed. That's how he's presented in the purport, without being dovetailed. Or in the word for word, without being performed. So dovetailed, that's a term that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur uses. It's a technical term because he's a precise user of language. And dovetailed, I learned this from a devotee who's a carpenter. When you want to join this piece of wood with that piece of wood, even without nails you can do it. Like a corner of a drawer or something like that, it has these pieces and then pieces that fit in those pieces, and then this piece fits in with that piece, and it's dovetailed. You join it and it can be actually even stronger than the piece of wood. So joining 2 pieces of wood, it's a carpentry term, dovetail. So Bhaktisiddhanta has used it, and in turn Srila Prabhupada has used it, where material propensity and service to Krishna are joined. The specific application of that is Lord Brahma in Sri Brahma Samhita. Lord Brahma, after all of his fantastic realization that they're in the Govinda Stotras that we chant every time we have a yajna. After that, he's at the top of realization. he then speaks to the Supreme Lord directly and says, I have a doubt. What's that? The doubt is, I have this realization, but I also have a desire. And it's not a small one. I have a desire to create a universe. We may have a desire to, whatever, create a software program, or get a promotion in our job, or something, get an A in our exam, or something. Desire on this plane. So his is create a universe. And the impetus for doing that was given to him by the Supreme Lord directly. So it can't even say, no, I don't want to do that. He wants to do it. But he's got this realization, and he's thinking, he's expressing, I'll become entangled. I'll lose my Krishna consciousness if I get down in the mud here and create a universe. What to do? So this term dovetailed. Connect that with the principal activities of bhakti, and Bhaktisiddhanta explains, and it's in the verses as well, as at the purports, that that becomes as powerful of an elevating principle as direct devotional practices themselves. It won't be a contamination. It will be a source of elevation, of consciousness. In fact, your mind and senses will be incompletely purified if you just do the devotional practices and refrain from that which you have the tendency to do. So, do that tendency that you have in Krishna consciousness. Or as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, perform your prescribed duty and always think of me. And then comes the yeah but thing that says, yeah, but it's really hard to always think of Krishna while I'm doing my prescribed duty. It's hard to think of Krishna even when I'm chanting japa. What to speak of doing my prescribed duty? My mind's all over the place. But that's the assignment. And we apply ourselves to the assignment. And that the always think of Krishna becomes possible by becoming attached to Krishna. And then you always think of Krishna because you're attached to Krishna. That which you're attached to, you always think of. Like the boy-girl romance thing. He's looking out the window thinking of her, and he's brushing his teeth thinking of her, and she's combing her hair thinking of him, and whatever they're doing, eating their meal, they're thinking of each other. Whatever they're doing, because it's romance. Can't get her off of my mind. So, become attached to Krishna. Then you always think of Krishna. And then you'll only do that which is pleasing to Krishna. You prescribe duty in a manner that's pleasing to Krishna. So that's the top of the mountain. Become attached to Krishna. So but I'm not attached to Krishna. So do those things that assist you to become attached to Krishna with the purpose in mind to become attached to Krishna. And with that, let go of the other stuff. Don't carry your rocks on your back. When I was, the first skit, Hare Krishna skit, that I saw at the Boston Temple, because I was visiting there, it was Drop Your Rocks. That was the title of the skit. And it started with somebody carrying a big sack that he was limping along like it was really heavy. Oh, heavy burden. And then, moaning and groaning, and so then some group of devotees come in and start having kirtan, Hare Krishna, and jumping and happy, and then they stop and they see the guy over there struggling with his bundle of rocks and say, hey, come on and join us. Oh, I got to carry my rocks. I can't join you. The Mudha. They say, no, you don't have to carry your rocks. And they say, well, I'll just move it from this shoulder to that shoulder. adjust the problem. Then it'll be all right. Oh, this shoulder hurts too. Then the kirtan, so they just chant and come on and join us. So he finally drops his rocks and comes and joins the kirtan, becomes happy. The burden of material existence is something that comes from tamagun. We're not meant for that. We're meant for self-realization. It's not an appeal for irresponsible life. It's an appeal for dovetail. You do what you do for Krishna. And then levity comes. And you don't do other things because it's not for Krishna. I'm going to read just a little passage from the purport. We'll end. Devotional service is to be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the supersoul of everything. For that is the only reliable path of self-realization or Brahman realization. In this verse, the word Brahma Siddhaye means to understand oneself to be different from matter, to understand oneself to be Brahman. Brahma Siddhaye. The Vedic words are Aham Brahmasmi. Brahma Siddhaye means that one should know that he is not matter, he is pure soul. In the purport of Bhagavad Gita 2:41, that's where the Vyavasayatmika Buddhi verse appears. Very singular focused attention. Prabhupada speaks in the purport about faith. With faith that if I achieve this one thing, all other things become accomplished. So you just focus on one thing. And that one thing is Krishna Bhakti, devotion unto Krishna. If I can just achieve devotion unto Krishna, all other things will follow. So let me focus on attaining Krishna Bhakti. And then in the two places in the purport, further, Prabhupada states, the highest perfection of Krishna consciousness is complete detachment from the bodily conception of life. Not going back to Godhead or attaining level of God or enjoying eternally in Krishna's pastime, serving him very blissfully, but becoming freed from the bodily conception of life. Because you can't get there if you hold on to the bodily conception of life. Then the rest of the purport, in the very end, the last paragraph, he says the same thing. And he says it this way: one should be so, not just convinced, but realized to the point where there's not even a chance of sense gratification to enter your life. That's required. So we're not there. Because we agree in principle we're not this body, and we get a little ache or pain, or attraction, repulsion, and we go there. Think, oh, our consciousness is still absorbed in matter. So we're not there. But the state of perfection, because that's what this verse is describing, the state of perfection is it's gone. So that means the spiritual conception is so complete. And I'm going to mention again, I promised you I would do this, so here we go. Back to text 13, because this is text 19, just before the Sadhu-Sangastaka verses are presented. But in text 13, which is an introductory verse to all of what Kapila Deva is going to be teaching for the next 11 chapters, next 7 chapters, is this system of yoga which delivers the ultimate benefit to the living entity. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes there's material benefit, spiritual benefit, and ultimate benefit. So the spiritual benefit, we don't need to deal with. The material benefit is temporary, illusory, and actually brings misery. The spiritual benefit is this beyond the material conception of self, aham brahmasmi, or brahma siddhaye. But that's not nikshreyasaya. That's not the ultimate benefit. The ultimate benefit is, in that spiritual conception, who is the Supreme Person, and I engage in service to the Supreme Person. Without that element, engagement in service to the Supreme Person, you can't reach that nikshreyasaya. The bhakti must be there. Even you're good at Sankhya, you have to engage in bhakti. What are the root of existence? Purposefully serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purposely serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are different kinds of yogas, but every yogi is supposed to engage in self-realization or Brahman realization. It is clearly stated here that unless one is fully engaged in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot have easy approach to the path of Brahma Siddhaye, which is very similar to what Krishna says in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna asks, which do you recommend? Worship of the impersonal or personal feature? Very direct question, very direct answer. Worship of the personal feature is best. Worship of the impersonal feature is very difficult for those who are embodied. So why do the difficult? We need all the help we can get. Take Krishna's help. Worship the personal feature. And that's the end of this section. The next verse begins prasangam. It's describing the association of sadhus, taking the association of sadhus to get to that standard, perfection, or at least on the threshold of perfection, or at least peering into the world of perfection. You're outside, you're looking in. But entrance is through association of devotees. It's just, the mountain may look, whoa, it's so big, and I'm so small and so weak. But the good news is, through association of sadhu, one can easily achieve that. It certainly requires, in addition to association, requires faith. But when one has faith in the right thing, the impossible becomes possible. We know this from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, one who has faith in Lord Chaitanya, then even he may be blind, he can see the stars in the sky. Even may he be lame, he can climb great mountains. If you're lame, you have to go up the elevator. You can't climb the stairs. What to speak of a mountain? But if you have faith, the lame can climb a mountain. And even a fool can understand the conclusive truths of the Vedas. So, after breakfast, we'll go into the first of the Sadhu-Sangastaka verses. The merit of and the function of devotee association, sadhu sangha. Oh, see if there's any comments or questions. I told you the class would be shorter. Anything? We have somebody with their hand up here. You want to? Should we do without it? Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, like you mentioned in the class about feeling the easiest process compared to the impersonal path of reaching realization of the impersonal path, etc. And even in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the same kind of thing is mentioned. But somewhere in the 7th chapter in the purport.
Somewhere in the 7th chapter in the purport.
Prabhupada has mentioned, I don't remember exactly which one, but that actually bhakti is not easy. It's difficult because it's difficult for people to follow the regulative processes and all that. So I'm a little clarified. So what's the easy path in bhakti and what's the difficult path in bhakti compared to the other paths?
Which would you like it, easy or difficult?
Of course, easy.
So it's easy, or referring to a phrase that Prabhupada used, it's simple for the simple and difficult for the crooked. Because our conditioning is, since time immemorial, tendency to be fruitive enjoyers, very strong and very deep. In that sense, it's difficult. But in another sense, it's easy because to perform the process, even a child can do. What prior qualification does one need to engage in the process of devotional service? No prior disqualification. What about, am I disqualified if I'm Jagai and Madhai? No. It's very easy and very approachable. And as the verse we read, serviceable and practical from the purport. It's easy. It's natural for the soul, not something artificial. It's natural. It's easy. It's difficult because of our conditioning. Our conditioning says, come on, you're independent. Enjoy. Remember one lecture in New York, in our Brooklyn temple, Prabhupada was describing this. Maya is beckoning. It's like in the Greek mythology stories, I forget what her name is, but it's called in the translation a siren, and she's beckoning. It's Maya. So Prabhupada was saying, come on and enjoy. Come on and enjoy, so I can kick you in the face. And we're suckers. We just, yeah, let me enjoy. And we're attached to our suffering. We're attached not to the suffering, we're attached to the activities that bring the suffering. The tendency to enjoy. In its unlimited varieties, and we have our favorite kinds of enjoyment. And different embodied beings do it this way and do it that way, but the principle is, the driving principle is, enjoy the senses. And we're prone to that, so therefore it's difficult. Lifetimes of conditioning in all species of life. Therefore it's difficult. It's a strong tendency. But tendency can be changed by practice. Another one of Prabhupada's phrases that it took me a number of years of hearing it hundreds of times to let it sink in. The phrase is very simple. By practice, something becomes second nature. So we have our conditioned nature that says, I want to enjoy. And there's a practice that says, let me be the servant. But even when we're being the servant, we want to enjoy. Somehow, I don't want to let go of that position. But if we practice in the mood of being a humble servant, and practice, and it becomes because it's actually our nature. But it becomes second nature. As much as a conditioning thing becomes nature. It's just habit. So to change a habit can be difficult. It takes some time, some investment of consciousness and practice. Then it becomes second nature. So instead of something unwanted, it's something wanted, and that something wanted takes its place. And that's just on the behavior side. Then there's the consciousness side. Like with your children. You want to teach them good manners or good etiquette. So just take simple ones. Please and thank you. Please. And you say, and what do you say? Please. Okay, here. Very good boy. And now that you have it, what do you say? Thank you. Okay, very good. So it becomes second nature, please and thank you. Consciousness may not have changed. May be completely selfish, but at least little behavior that says please and thank you. And to go a little more deeply, not a little more deeply, is the consciousness of humble request and gratitude. That's more challenging. But once that's there, it's second nature. It's stronger. Spiritual nature is stronger. Humility and gratitude is stronger than greed and pride and selfishness. It's stronger. So we cultivate through but it's not just cultivate a behavior, it's cultivate a consciousness. It's the strength of it is Krishna consciousness. So it's not easy, but it's natural. Okay? Yes? Does it work now? Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Paripashriti, I would like to understand more, Maharaj, if you can explain.
Okay, speak slowly. I got the first part, but you don't speak too fast.
Paripashriti, can you elaborate more on that word in this text 18?
Elaborate more. Can you be a little more specific? It's a little broad. What do you want?
So it says here, Paripashriti means that he can see everything in its right perspective.
Well, I gave a simple explanation, and that is, you see things as Krishna sees, in the right perspective. So let's take the example that Prabhupada gives of you're walking out the door at the end of the class, and you see a dollar bill on the floor. What's the right perspective? He gives three options. One is you leave it because it's not yours. Another is you put it in your pocket because now it's up for grabs. And another is you find out who it belongs to. So it's a question of proprietorship. The right perspective is, who does something belong to? The ultimate is it belongs to Krishna, but someone else may be the custodian of that something that belongs to Krishna. There's an example. See things in the right perspective. Or here's another one. Something that Prabhupada taught is, don't blame another who is serving as the instrument of your own karma. That's seeing things in the right perspective. I'm moving along the path of life, and all of a sudden, something happens. And I can blame someone for that something that happens, or I can take responsibility for it as this is my karma coming. Because of my misuse of free will, here I am in this situation. There's another example.
And there is more shlokas in Sri Ishopanishad, so we can also apply those shlokas in this
Sure.
Paripashati.
Sure. This is not an exhaustive list of similar verses from Scripture that speak the same thing. There's some other ones in the purport which I also didn't include. So something else?
So Maharaj, in the 19th verse, the translation, it says that perfection in self-realization cannot be attained by any kind of yogis unless he is engaged in devotional service. So in the Krishna consciousness, we start off with a goal that devotional service is the ultimate thing. And then during this process, we attain to the Brahma-Bhuta Prasannatma platform, where we are not disturbed by the happiness and distress, and from there where the real devotional service begins. But what about the people who doesn't have the devotional service as the goal, but they follow some yogic process like Patanjali, other yogic process, where they follow Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pratyahara, and then come to the Brahma-Bhuta Prasannatma platform, and
Do they?
how do they?
Do they?
At least lamenting it, because when they know that they are just not the body, but when they know that they are just the soul.
Well, let's just read again from the purport. It is clearly stated here that unless one is fully engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Personality Godhead, one cannot have easy approach to the path of Brahma Siddhi. So, there's two verses from Bhagavad Gita. Manushyanam sahasreshu kastad yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kashyan veti mam tatvataha. Very rare to find someone who achieves Brahma Siddhi from Patanjali Yoga. And very rare of those who may achieve that understand Krishna. So without that shelter in Krishna, is it stable or unstable? So something is going to provoke. Vishvamitra Muni and Saurabhi Muni, Prabhupada referred to those examples. Very accomplished. But little agitation and it was all lost. They'd go back to zero and start all over again. Unstable, without shelter. So, shelter. Put shelter in the front. Shelter of what or whom? Personality of Godhead. Okay? Then it's complete and direct. Yes. Can we? Will it reach there? You have to go around, I think. Go quickly. It works.
Maharaj, when one engages in the senses by
when one does what?
engages in the senses towards serving Krishna.
Yes.
We say that the I and the mind are dropped.
Okay.
But even in that process,
it's gradual. Okay. It's not abrupt. It's not a 1 or a 0.
And my question is, there are glimpses of happiness when the I is dropped during service, but how to prolong that happiness without the mind reminding that I am doing that service?
Purification. It's presented in an earlier verse when the mind has to become purified, and it's gradual. So you're built within the verse is, or your question rather, is the understanding or the experience that anishtata bhakti, something, when there's strong devotion, there's relief from that I and mine. But when bhakti becomes weaker, the I and mine becomes prominent again. So it's strengthening the bhakti, and that's gradual. And the strengthening of bhakti may go up and down. We say hills and valleys, so it's just like chanting. I may be more attentive, less attentive. It's unsteady.
How does
Becomes the steady platform comes from purification, anartha nivritti. You pass through the anartha nivritti state. You familiar with that term? Oh, anartha means unwanted things. Nivritti means eradication. When the unwanted things of the heart are eradicated by continuing carefully to practice bhakti, you pass through the anartha nivritti stage and come to the steady stage. But in between, it's unsteady. Anishtata bhakti. Before you get to nishtha bhakti, steady. So you tolerate and continue to put your attention in the devotional cleansing process. And then it becomes gradually steady because purification is taking place. Prabhupada's example, simple example, if you go into a house or a place, a closet or something that's not been cleaned in years and years and years and years, jumbled mess, how long does it take to make it clean? And in between, all the settled dust and things, it just fills the air. And but you continue the cleansing process, and gradually, eventually, it becomes very clean in its proper position. So that the heart is like that, and that place of steadiness is when the heart becomes clean. Go ahead.
I mean, doing the same thing again and again also applies here. That doesn't work. So what should we do differently? You continue, it's simultaneously two things. You continue the process, that's a behavior, but more than the behavior, it's also bring your consciousness to Krishna. Japa. Chant your rounds, and each day, practice consciously, bring your mind to Krishna, bring your mind to the name, the sound of the name. The mind wants to go here and there. It's chanchala. But keep practicing. Bring your consciousness to the supreme pure. The consciousness will become pure. The mind will become cleansed. So you continue. Abhyasa yoga yuktena. Continue to practice with sincere calling to Krishna. In a nutshell. And not only chanting, but then the activities that you do. That's supposing somebody comes to the temple here in Seattle. I've commented previously, there's a very nice system of giving people some service. I met somebody that's newly coming to the temple, and I asked them what they do, and I wash the pots once a week. So that's very nice. So initially I get to do some service. And then it's, I'm so humble I wash the pots once a week. The tendency to become proud is so strong. I see how humble I am. So, but continue to wash the pots once a week and bring your consciousness to Krishna, because that tendency will become relieved by Krishna's mercy and your desire for that purification. You continue to practice. Material tendencies, this is why it's difficult. Material tendencies are very strong. The tendency for pride is very strong. How do we get rid of it?
You continue to practice. And take on this practice, you take the strength of the instruction, remain and cultivate a humble mood. I'm trying, but pride is very strong, or greed is very strong, or lust is very strong, or anger is very strong, or the material energy is very strong. But, it gradually, its force upon us subsides through purification. Consciousness acts and matter moves. Bring your consciousness to Krishna. That's the principle. And continue to practice that. That's Krishna consciousness. Something else? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was reading this text 19, and initially when I read this first paragraph, this Brahma Siddhya, that is equivalent to the Sankhya philosophy, matter and spirit.
Yes, but depending upon the application, it may remain on a limited level of realization. It's meant, as you said, to be on the Krishna conscious platform, connecting with Krishna. That's Brahma Siddhaya. But it may be read by someone who's not Krishna conscious, or a impersonal Sankhya philosopher, that it's just understanding I'm Brahman.
That was my next question.
I knew it was.
Looks like that it is taking us to the part of effulgence, and where we really don't want to go.
That's right.
This sentence says that, and this sentence says that with bhakti one can have an easy approach to the path of Brahm Siddhi. So then at that point when I read this, I was totally confused. Then
Really? I was totally happy.
But then I continued reading. In the last paragraph it says that yes, this is not the effulgence we are talking about, the Brahm Jyoti.
So here's some advice. When reading carefully, as you're doing, which is very good, yay, reading carefully, ki jai. So read carefully, but don't take things out of context. Look at the big picture. And what's the message of the big picture? Prabhupada doesn't have to say everything in each and every sentence. He says something and it's part of the whole context. So what's the context? Bhakti. So this is a subset of, then bhakti means the supreme, we're not speaking simply, so later it's there. So as you're reading, don't get stuck on something that may be read by somebody that doesn't understand the context, may be misunderstood. Take it in the bigger context. Not only this particular example, but all of devotional writing, or Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. There are verses in the Bhagavatam, for example, that the impersonalists love, because it even lends itself to some impersonal message. They just ignore the rest of the Bhagavatam. They just take that little slice and say, look, impersonalism, ki jai. But it's not impersonalism, it's a little slice of a bigger picture. So just for your own gradual maturing in Krishna consciousness, and you read something, there's the bigger context, and I'll say it even more clinically. This, when I began on yesterday morning's discussion about Laghu Bhagavatamrita, do you remember that discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
That Rupa Goswami is taking this one verse, that's the basis and support of the other 18,000 verses, or 17,999 verses. One verse supports all the others. That means all the others, if there's some uncertainty about what does this mean or that mean or the other thing mean, you check it against that one. And that one is the essence, that the others are simply illuminating. And if it looks like it's not, go back to the one verse and hold it to the light of that one verse. And then you can understand it correctly. And that's just one verse, or the purport, or the section, or what's Kapila's teachings in general. He's not just teaching the effulgence. He's not just teaching knowledge. He's not just teaching meditation. He's teaching pure devotion to Krishna. So now, that's the bigger picture. Take this message in the context of the bigger picture. Then you won't have a problem. That help?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj.
Up front here?
Maharaj, you mentioned, I think yesterday and today also, that absorption in
what?
Absorption in spirit is what we need to do as compared to absorption in matter. Now, in terms of practical devotional service, it's easy and very exciting to do that if we take up something which we are good at, which we like to do, and so somebody likes preaching or so we can develop that kind of complete absorption in that much more easily. Like you get up in the morning and you're so excited to do that, and you even develop your skills in that. Is it okay to focus more on that, develop your expertise in one thing which you are very much inclined towards, while at the same time obviously we should be doing things which are needed to do, and developing our qualities, etc. But is it okay to just focus, because that helps what I feel in my personal experience in the absorption part of it more?
I would like to give a qualified answer, a yes but answer. If you hook that person you just described up to a surrender to Krishna meter, is it going to be, from 0 to 10, where's it going to be? So while it helps in the absorption, is it equally helping in the dependence upon and surrender to Krishna quantum? Not necessarily. I'm doing what I like to do. That's dovetail. I'm doing what I like to do for Krishna. And it helps me get absorbed. So that's good. Now, there are some things that that I understand it's important for me, either because I just read it or somehow understand it, or it may be even suggested to me or directed to me, do that. I don't feel I'm so good at that. I'm not really attracted to that. But I do understand that that's important. Now what do I do? So my phrase is, you borrow strength from those things that give you strength and apply some of that strength over here. So in a gradual, incremental, careful, not too much too little way, you invest in this other thing, and one of the things that you'll learn is surrender unto Krishna. One of the happiest activities for that is book distribution. One of the realizations from book distribution is, who goes out and wakes up in the morning thinking, I want to go meet people that don't have anything in their mind about a spiritual path, and go find them and convince them that they want to take this book? Who does that? Who naturally wakes up in the morning thinking that one? In the world, salespeople may do something like that, but not spiritual literature that's selling something that's somebody has a buzz for. So when you do that, also there's some amongst the devotees that do that service, it's called causeless unwillingness. There's this thing in the mind that says, oh no, I don't want to do this. But I know I should do it, so I'll do it. And every day, it starts off like that, commonly, not universally. But I do it. And something happens when you do it in the right mood. There's this relationship with Krishna that magic starts to happen and people come and things, and it's amazing. And by the end of the day, it's whoopee. And the next morning, it's causeless unwillingness. It's one example of what I'm saying. So then the devotee that does that service starts to think, wow, I really have to do my morning sadhana, so I have the strength to go do that service, etc. And so many other things may be there. One of the important lessons at some point in time in everyone's Krishna consciousness that must be learned is surrender to Krishna is on Krishna's terms, not yours. Otherwise it's not surrender. So that means something I may not like, but if it's what Krishna wants, let me align my wants with Krishna's wants. In the beginning, absorption may be difficult, but in the end, that connection is such great strength, gives such great strength, and you can do anything that Krishna sends your way, happily. Not just the thing that gives me absorption because I like it. And life is like that. It's diverse. And relationship with Krishna is like that. He wants our heart. Not some of it. He wants all of it. And so there's different ways that Krishna draws our hearts to him. But that's what surrender is. What Krishna wants. In Nectar Devotion, there's a description of the rasas. And when it comes to the rasa of servitorship, the example is given of Krishna's son Pradyumna. And the expression is presented that because of that dasya rasa, the servitor of Krishna, if Pradyumna wanted to do something, and Krishna didn't want him to do that something, he wouldn't do that something. And then conversely, if Pradyumna didn't want to do something and Krishna wanted to do that something, he would do that something. That's dasya, servitorship. And that's where we begin. Not necessarily dasya rasa, but servitorship. And there may be, as what happened in Prabhupada's life, preparation to do that service that you think, it's not easy for me to do. Go to the Western countries and, There's one lecture on, and it may even have been in Seattle, in Prabhupada's, Bhaktisiddhanta's disappearance day, and Prabhupada describes with humility and chagrin that he gave the year, and 40 years later I did it. But I did it. I followed the order of the spiritual master. Although I felt it was impossible. But he gave me the order, so I did it. Surrender. One may have to prepare oneself, but surrender. Something else? Okay, so we'll break for breakfast. 10 minutes to 10, is that good? Then we'll finish reasonable time. 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock? Because? Okay, see you at 10 o'clock. You come back and bring your japa beads and chant Hare Krishna a bit. See.
Prabhu sent a message saying he contacted BB. I don't know what is BB.
Brajabihari.
And Hari Vasya or something.
Yeah. Haryashva. Haryashva.
And he'll contact Sunanda Prabhu later.
Let me give you Sunanda's number so you can give it to him.
I have it here. I got it.
How did you find it?